Alright, so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to be solving rational equations. But before I jump into the equation, there's two things that we have to understand. The first one is that we cannot divide by 0. And this is simple to understand. If I have $20, and I can divide $20 between 5 people, that means each individual is going to get $4. I can divide $20 between 2 people. Each individual would get $10. But there's no way that I can divide the $20 between 0 people. And that's just impossible to do. So we cannot divide by 0. The second thing we have to understand is how to get a common denominator. In a simple example, let's say I have 1/2 plus 5/4. Now we cannot add these two fractions because I don't have the same denominator. I don't have the same number on the bottom. So what I need to find is the least common multiple between 2 and 4. The least common multiple between 2 and 4 is 4. So what I have to do to the 1/2 is that on the bottom I have to multiply by 2. Whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do it on the top. My 5/4, this fraction has the what I call the lead denominator. So we don't make any change to this one. So again, what I have here is on the top of the first fraction, I have 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4, which is what we wanted. And I have 5/4. Now we have to multiply on the top and the bottom by the same number so that the value of that fraction doesn't change. We know that 1/2 is 0.5 in decimal. 2/4 is also 0.5. So again, the only thing we did is that we got the same common denominator, but we haven't really changed any, or we didn't change the value of the first fraction. Now, once I have the same common denominator, now I can add. So 2 plus 5, 7. The bottom, we don't add the bottom, we just leave it as 4. So again, 1/2 plus 5/4 is simply 7/4. Maybe nervous. All right, the rational equation that we are going to solve is x minus 6 divided by 2x squared plus 2x minus 4 plus x divided by 2x minus 2 equals 1/2. So again, what we want to do, or what we have to find, is the x value such that when we plug it into, let's say, this first fraction, and we plug it into the second fraction, and we evaluate both of them, when we combine them or when we add them, we get exactly 1/2. So again, what is the x value that when I plug it into, let's say, my first fraction and my second fraction, and then I evaluate and I add both of these fractions, whatever they add, they equal to simply 1/2. Well, what we need first is the common denominator. And we said I need to have the same thing on the bottom. And in rational equations, it's way easier if on the denominator we're dealing with factors. That way we can see what we're missing. So for the first fraction, the x minus 6 over 2x squared plus 2x minus 4, we know that when we have a quadratic equation, what we have to do is the x method. But again, even before I jump into the x method, to make it a little bit easier, 2, 2, and negative 4. What I can factor out from these three terms is a positive 2. So again, what I'm going to do is factor out a 2. Now what I'm going to have here is x squared plus x minus 2. Now again, I'm just factoring out a 2. So 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times positive x is 2x. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So I'm just factoring out that 2. That way when I apply the x method to find the factors of the quadratic, it's a little bit easier. Now I'm going to do the x method. So I need a times c in this space. In this space I need the value of b. Now my a in this case is positive 1. My b is also positive 1. My c, keep in mind, it's not just 2, it's negative 2. So again, what I need in this space here is a times c. So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. My b value is 1, positive 1. So I need two factors, two numbers that multiply to negative 2. That will add up to positive 1. Those two factors are positive 2 and negative 1. Now again, what I needed is two numbers that multiply to negative 2 but add up to 1. And those two numbers are 2 and negative 1. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. 2 plus negative 1 is positive 1. Since we have more positives, we end up with a positive 1. Now here what I like to do is divide by my just 1x. Since I only have 1x squared, I simply divide by 1x. So my two factors are going to be x is a positive 2. So I have plus 2. My other factor is going to be x. This is a negative 1, so it's minus 1. All right. So again, the factors of x squared plus x minus 2 is x plus 2 times x minus 1. So again, I have x plus 2 times x minus 1. And when I multiply, again, now 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 1, that would give me the 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. So again, these three are the factors of my quadratic 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. Alright, now what I'm going to do is factor out the denominator for this middle fraction. So again, what I have is on top, I simply have x. This one is not quadratic. The only thing I can do to 2x minus 2, these two terms, the only thing I can factor out is a positive 2. So again, I factor out a positive 2. My other factor is going to be x minus 1. Again, 2 times x is positive 2x. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So again, I have the factors, the two factors in this case of 2x minus 2. Now, on this fraction, I simply have 1/2. I'm just going to put it in parentheses. Now that I have the factors of the denominator, now I have to find the common denominator. And this is not as hard as it looks. The hard part is to first find the factors of the denominator. That way we can see what we're missing. Now, let me just separate it a little bit. So again, on this one, what I have is x minus 6 divided by 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 1. I'm not really going to be able to do that. Plus x over 2 times x minus 1 equals simply 2 equals to 1 over 2. All right, now in this equation, what I like to say is that in this case, the first fraction, this one here, this one has the lead denominator. So these two denominators, we have to make them look like this one here. So again, my middle fraction, the denominator of this fraction, what this one is missing, that this one has, is the x plus 2. And remember, whatever I multiply by on the bottom, I also have to multiply on the top. So I'm missing the x plus 2. I have to multiply on the top by x plus 2. The last one, what this one is missing from the lead denominator is, well, it has a 2. What it's missing is the x plus 2 times x minus 1. So again, this one is missing the x plus 2 times x minus 1. All right. So now that I have the same common denominator, what I'm going to get first is the values that x cannot be equal to. Where do I get this from? Well, we get it from the common denominator. Earlier we said we cannot divide by 0. If we look at x plus 2, the only way I can get x plus 2 inside these parentheses is if x is negative 2. And the only way I can get a 0 inside these two parentheses is if x is positive 1. So again, x cannot be equal to negative 2 or positive 1. Otherwise, we would end up with 0 on the bottom. And we just said that we cannot divide by 0. So once I have the same denominator, what I'm only going to work out is the top. Again, we kind of get rid of the bottom since we already found what it's used for. So again, on top, what I have is x minus 6 plus x times x plus 2. Again, I have my x minus 6 plus the x times x plus 2. We have the equal to. We had 1 times x plus 2 times x minus 1. And the rest is not like algebra, simple algebra. So I have to distribute first on both sides. So here again, I have the x minus 6 plus, again, x times x and x times 2. X times x, what I get is x squared. X times positive 2 is positive 2x. Then I distribute on the right side of the equal sign. Here I'm multiplying by 1. Distributing that 1 is not going to change anything, so I'm just going to do my FOIL. X times x and x times negative 1. 2 times x and 2 times negative 1. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative x. 2 times x is positive 2x. And 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. The next step I'm going to do is on each side individually, I'm going to combine like terms. So on the left side of the equal sign, this part here, the only thing I can combine is the x and the 2x. So what I have is 3x, and before I do that, I'm going to write it in order from the highest power to the lowest. So I have my x squared. X plus 2x is positive 3x. And then I have my negative 6. So again, right now, the only thing I did is I combined the 2x with the positive x, and I got 3x. I have my x squared and then minus 6. Again, I just wrote it in order from the highest to the lowest power. Now on the right side of the equal sign, and the only thing I can combine is the negative x with the positive 2x. And in this case, what I have is my x squared. Negative x plus 2x is positive x. And then I have a negative or a minus 2. Now I'm still trying to find that value, that x value, that when I plug it into my x, and again I add these two fractions are going to be equal to 1/2. So think about it like this. Now what I have to do is combine like terms, but I have x squares on opposite sides of the equal sign. I have x's on opposite sides of the equal signs, and I have numbers on opposite sides of the equal sign. So think about it this way. In order to combine like terms that are on opposite sides of the equal sign, we have to do the opposite in order to move it to the other side. So if I want to combine this x squared with this x squared, I'm not going to have positive 2x squared. No, this is positive x squared. So what I have to do to move it to the other side is do the opposite, minus x squared minus x squared. So what I end up with is these two, they cancel. X squared minus x squared. I have 3x minus 6 is equal to x squared minus x, they cancel, and I have x minus 2. Now I'm gonna move this x to the other side to combine it with this one, and I have to do the opposite of this, which is, we know this is positive, so I have to do minus x minus x. What I have is 3x minus x is 2x. Bring down that negative 6 is equal to x minus x, they cancel, so I end up with simply minus 2. Now what I need to do is move this negative 6 to this side. So I have a plus 6 plus 6. So what I end up with is 2x, negative 6 plus 6, it cancels. 2x is equal to negative 2 plus 6 is positive 4. And I got one last step to do. So again, I have 2x minus 4. 2x minus 4. 2x is equal to 4. Last thing we have to do is divide by 2. Divide by 2. So x is equal to positive 2. Again, now if I go back and plug in this 2 into this here, what I should get is equal to 1/2. So that's our answer. X is equal to positive 2. Again, if I go back and plug in my x here, whatever I get for this fraction plus whatever I get for this fraction, when I add both of these, what I'm gonna get is simply 1/2. And